Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina. On Sundays, I do a thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. It is the last Sunday of the month, so it's time to look at religion again, making this week's book 12 Major World Religions, The Beliefs, Rituals, and Traditions of Humanity's Most Influential Faiths by Jason Boyett. The accompanying cocktail is an Infinite Faith, which is 1.5 ounces of Hayman's Old Tom Gin, 1/4 ounce of sherry, 1/2 ounce of Hibiscus Tea, 1/2 ounce of Cardamom Syrup, and 1/3 ounce of lemon juice. So let's do this. Let's do this again. I would say an ounce and a half of Hayman's Old Tom Gin. Little extra gin. That's okay. First off, this is exactly the sort of primer that I was looking for on world religions. Last month's general topic book by Houston Smith left me ambiguous about my intended field of study, if you will. This one made me excited to see what I could learn. It is probably more sherry than I needed to. I'm going heavy with the pours today, folks. Heavy with the pours. But this is exactly as advertised. It is a brief overview of the 12 major world religions that have shaped planet Earth we live on, plus 3 bonus religious overviews that were sort of the precursors to Western civilization. What does that mean? What do I mean by that? Well, he starts with overviews of ancient Egyptian religious practices, ancient Greek practices, and then Norse practices, calling these the foundations, which, fair. All right, I'll buy that. It's fair. All right, that's actually the foundations of pretty much everything. If you look at the Middle East as being the cradle of civilization, which is what it was called when I was, in middle school. Not sure if it's still accurate. About 1/3, I'm just going to squeeze half a lemon into this and call that about 1/3. And I got to shake this up. Well, he starts with the overviews of ancient Egyptian religious practices. It's fair because from Mesopotamia, you can follow the progression of humanity and religion across Egypt, then north into Greece, up into Europe. And each of these religions are fascinating in their own right, but they are, neo-paganism aside, not active religions. And yes, anybody worshipping Egyptian, Greek, or Norse pantheons is engaging in neo-paganism. Sorry, this is going to disappoint people, but there is no unbroken lineage of witches going back to the Eleusinian fields or the burning times, or whatever you want to call them. Or, to be fair, what I should say is there is no smoking gun that definitively proves it. Kind of like all those people out there who are 1/16th Cherokee, only to be deeply disappointed with their 23andMe results. So with Egypt, Greece, and Scandinavia, the chapters all followed the same basic outline. They went over the creation myth, major deities, how practice was carried out, death and afterlife, and how these religions ended. Christianity. Christianity is how all of these religions ended, just FYI. It's pretty good. It's sweet. It's sweet, but it's got good flavor. I'm going to thank the hibiscus for that one. Hibiscus isn't sweet. That's going to be the cardamom syrup. It just blends very well together. So from there he goes into the 12, based on most practiced to least practiced. So in order, we cover Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Taoism, Judaism, Confucianism, Baha'ism, Shintoism, Jainism, and Zoroastrianism. It includes this incredibly useful chart, which I'm going to pop up right here for you guys, which includes base statistics and more than anything helped me to realize the scope of the task I have assigned myself. Like my reading list for the next 3 months, 2 months, 3 months, have bought me a little time to figure this out. Like, how do I want to do this? Because there are 66 books in the Bible. Just in the Bible, Old and New Testament, the major text of Christianity, all 20,000 sects. Come back to that in just a second. 66 books between the Old and New Testament, which means covering one book of the Bible a month, just for the Bible, would take me more than 5 years. And that's not even taking into account the literally thousands of literary contributions of the over 20,000 sects and subdivisions of Christianity. 20,000. Which I mathed it out, and doing only one a month just for Christianity, covering one from each of the 20,000 sects, including I could find one for each, would take me 1,666 years, which is deeply ironic, giving Christianity's aversion to the number 666. So that's actually kind of funny to me. So clearly I will not be reviewing all of the Christian subdivisions. Each chapter started with a brief, and I do mean brief, one-page overview of the religion under discussion, followed with a with, again, a very brief timeline of key events within that religion. Each chapter has a quick facts, which tells you the percentage of the world's population that practices that religion, both in percentages and numbers. So, for example, 29% of the world practices Christianity, which is 2.2 billion people. A regional distribution is provided. So for Christianity, how many are in Europe, America, Latin America, Africa? The largest branch by far is Catholicism. When it began, what is the primary text? A little bit of the culture that birthed the religion is discussed before going into the major figures of the religion, which will include the founding prophets. So you know, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Baha'i, Buddhism, Confucianism, who started the religion, that's included in all of them. The only one without a grand founder is Shinto, which basically was just always there because it's very much a nature religion. It's not pagan from the perspective of like the ancient Egyptians who had a pantheon of gods. It's just pagan as in it was nature based. So I did not mean to make my makeup match my drink, but it just sort of happened. The major tenets of the religion are discussed. What is their creation myth, primary deity or deities, scripture, ethics, general belief? How do they handle death? Do they believe there is an afterlife? Major texts include not just the scripture that each uses as a foundational text, but again, literary contributions from those who practice the faith. How is each religion practiced? What are considered sacraments? What are the major subdivisions? Yeah, there are 20,000 versions of Christianity, but broadly, how are those broken down? What are the festivals and holy days of the religion, and what might the future look like for those who practice this faith? And all the chapters follow this format, every single one of them, which is incredibly helpful as an overview. All chapters include the sidebars with information which is specific to the religion. Like the chapter on Judaism explains how Judaism is not historically always the underdog. All right, I know that's going to be a very controversial statement given the political climate today, but the sidebar in that chapter is called In the Name of the Lord. One of the sidebars, I should say. There's several sidebars, but In the Name of the Lord. And he includes the historical tidbit that, quote, God promised the land of Canaan to the people of Israel, but the territory was occupied by others at the time, and God commanded the mass slaughter of these men, women, and children, end quote. Now, this was thousands of years ago, so we're not talking about 1946 when the state of Israel was created following World War II. We're talking thousands and thousands of years ago. And the Jews way back then were cool with it because the Canaanites were pagans, polytheists. They were not worshipers of the one God. But Boyett points out that this one act kind of set the stage for the following 3,000 years of violence in Israel. And it's never died down. Israel, the kingdom of heaven has always been fraught with violence from that moment to this. Of the 12 religions in this book, the two I had not heard of before were Baha'i and Jainism. I'm probably mispronouncing Baha'i. Baha'i is a 19th century breakaway religion from Islam. And the founders of this faith were executed for apostasy, which is right on track with pretty much all monotheistic religions. And to basically no one's surprise, I mean, even though I had never heard of Baha'i, I was not in the least bit surprised to learn that their largest temple is located in Illinois because religious freedom. America rocks. Jainism is a spin-off from both Hindu and Buddhism, kind of, takes them both, but primarily Buddhism. It takes nonviolence to an interesting extreme. They're not just strict vegetarians. They won't eat certain vegetables even because they think it's violence to the plant. The practitioners will wear masks to ensure that they don't accidentally inhale small bugs. They don't do woodworking or stoneworking or basically any manual labor because it could cause them to do violence against another living thing like the tree or the stone. So how do they live? Well, there's a great deal of irony there. This is an extremely ascetic religion. Like the faithful, when they move into retirement or monastic life or whatever the Jain version of monastic life is, they don't even use dinnerware. They don't carry a knife or a fork with them. They use their cupped hands, and whatever can fit in their hands is what they can eat. Craziness. Okay, I shouldn't say that. That's very judgy of me. I shouldn't say it's crazy. It strikes me as crazy because I just had an enormous burger for lunch with a friend of mine. So I shouldn't really be judging what other people do, though. They only eat what they can hold in their hands. And as they get older and near death, they practice an interesting form of ritual suicide of death by starvation. That's part of their faith. It is illegal in India, but they still do it. So what is so unusual about this? That is not even what's unusual, believe it or not. What is unusual is this extremely ascetic, non-violent religion tends to have the very wealthiest of India's citizens among her ranks. Because you can't work with your hands or do any kind of law enforcement or military service due to the non-violence of your religious beliefs, that pretty much leaves you as being a financier or a banker as a career. Yeah, I'm hiccuping. So it's ironic that this very ascetic religion tends to draw wealth because that's all they can practice. That's all they can do to sustain themselves, even though, I don't know. There's a lot of contradictions there. I'm kind of curious about it. I will get to Jainism when I get to it. I'm kind of leaning towards like studying the religions historically, like the manner, like during a historical timeline, if you will, because I think humanity evolved with religion, or rather religion evolved with humanity. And so that's going to help me learn quite a bit about the history of humanity by studying these religions. The other thing that really surprised me in this book was Zoroastrianism. I had heard of it before. I actually had heard of it. Most people, surprisingly, have probably heard of it, although they probably don't know the name Zoroastrian. They probably know the name Zarathustra because of Friedrich Nietzsche's very famous philosophical treatise, Thus Spake Zarathustra. That's the famous one where he says, you know, where the madman, the Superman, goes screaming through the streets, God is dead and man has killed him. That's from Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra. So most people are familiar at least with the name. What surprised me about it? I had heard of it. There are two things that surprised me about Zoroastrianism. First off, there's actually some controversy as to which came first, Zoroaster or Judaism. I had always just assumed it was Zoroaster. It's called that because Zoroaster is the Greek version of the name Zarathustra. His actual name was Zarathustra. Why did I always think that? Well, Zoroaster, much like Judaism, is a monotheistic religion, and it's entirely possible it was the first monotheistic religion. Possible, but not confirmed, all right? It has a fairly straightforward philosophy, which can be summed up as you know, do good things, think good thoughts, say good words. So good thoughts, good words, good deeds. That's it. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Very straightforward, right? Hard to fuck up a religious tenet that simple. Judaism is considerably more complex, all right? I mean, generally speaking, humanity goes from simple to complex. So you start out down here and you build your way up to here, generally speaking, all right? Dummy it down, it comes to us as humanity's attention span has whittled itself down to that of the average fruit fly because of social media and, you know, phones and the give it to me now and the me first generation and just so many things. So I was surprised that people think Judaism came first. But, on the other hand, we don't really know when Zarathustra lived. All right? So it's certainly possible that Judaism was there first. It's also entirely possible that the two religions developed at about the same time, but separate from each other. Kind of like how people in China, England, and Peru all figured out spinning, weaving, and sewing without having had contact with each other. Ideas can appear to more than one person and or culture at a time. And it's really only in the last 20th, 21st century, last 100 years or so, the people have gotten super pissy about being first and getting credit for being first. Those slutty muses will give the ideas to whoever is listening, basically. So the second thing, I said there are two things that really surprised me. First was we don't know exactly, you know, what came first, the chicken or the egg here, if you will. The second thing that really surprised me about Zoroastrianism is that there's really only two famous Zoroastrians. And we have hundreds of Christian saints, dozens of important imams and rabbis, major leaders in Confucian thought and Buddhist, you know, nonviolence. But Zoroastrianism has like two. You got Zarathustra himself, Freddie Mercury. Yep. Farrokh Bulsara, a.k.a. Freddie Mercury, a.k.a. lead singer of Queen, was Zoroastrian. Not sure how devout he was, but he definitely contributed great beauty to the world via his incredible singing. So, good thoughts, good words, good deeds indeed. So as you can see, I have my work cut out for me. There's a lot to learn here. There's a lot to learn just on the matter of religion. World history is, 4 million years old. I'm only going back a couple of 100,000 years. And that's just active religions. That is not including the myths that shaped the cultures and then later the religions. I'm leaning towards doing one small religious reading per week on like Wednesday. I'm not sure yet. I do think that I should read the various religious texts, but I don't want to, again, read the whole Bible and then give a brief synopsis in a week. I feel like that's doing myself a disservice, all right? I think that I think if you want to understand how humanity grew and developed, you need to understand the faiths that shaped humanity. More than psychiatry, more than psychology, I think that understanding faith is going to help you to understand your fellow man. And not just whatever your faith may be, but the faith of those around you. Because that shapes you. It has to. It has to. Faith has to shape you. Because without God, we have... Take a look outside. Oh my God. That's what happens in an absolutely godless society. It's insane. So yeah. Anyways, I have a few more months. Like I said, I bought myself a few months with my reading list. I mean, this month I read about the cowboys, right? So next month I'm reading the Indian side of the equation, including a book on the Native American church, which is new. It's definitely not as old because, well, as America fulfilled manifest destiny under Polk's doctrine, yeah, we pretty much wiped out the Native American religions, and so now we have the Native American church, which is kind of a conglomeration, is my understanding, which I'll learn more about that next month, and I'll tell you more for sure. In October, I'm reading a book about modern Wicca. Again, it's not an old, continuously practiced religion. It's not an old religion. It's about 100 years old itself, maybe 150 years old. I mean, it's about as new as Baha'i. It's not continuously practiced. It's absolutely neo-paganism, but it's witchy, right? I mean, it's an organized religion. It's not necessarily witchcraft, but it's witch adjacent, so it fits with the usual October theme of scary, spooky stuff I do. So I have a few, and then in November I'm reading Gilgamesh, which is a standalone myth on its own. And it's actually one of the oldest foundational myths of humanity, so I thought that's a good place to start. So we'll read Gilgamesh in November. So I have a few months to figure out how I want to tackle the religious texts without letting them take over my more enjoyable reading, like the cowboys and the Indians, right? Anyways, this book was a great primer. Like as I buy more books, I tend to take books I've read and reviewed and shove them into the attic against the day that I can afford a big, beautiful Victorian mansion with a dedicated 8,000 book library to... You know, I just take them off the shelves, put them in the attic, and then I make room for more books because books equal happiness. This book will not be shuffled into attic storage because I'm going to want to reread the chapters on a given religion before I dive in. Plus, it conveniently compiles for me what religious texts I need to be reading for each religion, as well as what other books would have useful knowledge. So, yeah, this one's going to stay out and readily available. It was eminently readable and included some of the pitfalls and pluses of each religion as it's discussed in turn. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye.